we'll go ahead and get started, and everybody that winds up joining us, they can join us in the middle. We appreciate you guys being here. This interagency briefing is on cost management, especially on the construction projects. So we appreciate you being here. And the guy that you've been talking to or hearing there for a minute is Martin Jacobs with Hanscomb. Say hey.
Hey, everybody. Nice to be joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And I'm Dave Lowe, I'm the briefing host, and we would just want to welcome everybody that's here today. We have folks coming in from just about every agency under the sun. There was a new one on me with the email addresses for the Naval Nuclear Laboratory. So love to connect with you folks if you want to let us know why you're here as well. But we welcome everybody. I'm wearing my Navy suck-up outfit today for the folks here from the Navy. A bunch of folks coming in from the Navy, so that's why I did that, even though they're in the bottom right-hand corner. Real quick disclaimer, this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It's provided you, the audience, for informational purposes only, and all participation in this briefing is not an indication or endorsement to buy from any vendor, including Hanscomb. This is that way we can all just talk. How about that? And real quick, we got a couple of things to let you know about. If you have any questions on the side that you can open up, you can also post. You can text those questions in that panel, as well as raise your hand. If you see that little hand doodah thing on there, you can hit that button and you can raise your hand and we can engage that way. If you called in on the phone, and there's a bunch of folks that called in on the phone, if you called in on the phone, make sure you hit the audio pin so that we can unmute you. There's a couple of folks that I may send that out to, that if we wind up having to ask or engage you guys in that, but you have to hit the pound plus that number plus the pound in order to do that. As far as emails, if you want to communicate during this session, you can send it to support@govbrief.us, or you can also, if it's something off topic or something specific that you want to send to Martin, send it to govsupport@hanscombconsult.com, and that'll get there. And if you like the way that Martin's Google looking office looks behind him and you want to make him bigger, you can, and you can just grab this little bar on the side and you can make us bigger, or you can make us disappear altogether if you want to. So if you want death by PowerPoint, that's what you can do. For the agenda for today, we're going to give you a dose about Hanscomb, why Martin is here today, as well as the FAR language and other components that revolve around challenges of federal construction dealing with the budgeting and estimating. And we'll talk about how you can mitigate the risks for your agency and give you some procurement options as well. So with that, we're going to open this up to everybody gets the chance to be able to participate today. So we're going to launch the poll. Why are you here today? To learn more about construction budgeting? Do you have cost issues on a specific project? And you can answer as many as you want, by the way. This is multiple choice. So current cost market challenges, everybody should click that one because it's a crazy market right now, right, Martin?
Yep, that's correct. Well,
and learn more about estimating process, or want an excuse to slip out of another meeting. So there you go. So at least some Weisenheimer has to pick one of those. So get that. So we appreciate you guys being here, but this will give us a good idea what you want us to be able to address, and we'll kind of tailor it to the way to what you need. So we'll give you another 5, 4, 3. You can do it. I know it. 2, 1, and there you go. All right. So this is what it looks like. 83% here to learn more about construction budgeting, and the same with learn more about estimating process. So great. We appreciate you guys being here, but we have a lot of people that have issues on a project, which is why I think a bunch of folks are here today, Martin, and that is awesome. We appreciate you guys being here and participating in that. And for those of you who didn't, you get the chance in a few minutes. So Martin, tell us about Hanscomb. How did you guys get started?
So I'm interested. Fewer people seem to be concerned about the current market conditions than they are about the estimating process. That's interesting. But anyway, yeah, my business partners and I, we work for large companies, very large publicly traded companies for a bunch of years, and we kind of became disenfranchised a little bit just because we thought that the structure of the companies and the emphasis they put on services we provide kind of dwindled a little bit, and they got kind of tied up in their internal politics and be more internal facing. So 6 years ago, we decided we're going to get back to what we do really well, and look after our clients as we want to, for the great clients they are. So we started Hanscomb Consulting here in Virginia, in Alexandria, Old Town, in 2013. The three principals alone have 95 plus years of experience, and it's all in the cost management and construction management industry and market. So we feel and then we have 18 additional staff, and all they do is cost estimating and cost management. So we see ourselves as experts. We've followed our clients a little bit. We've opened markets or offices in DC and New York and Colorado, and we're looking at Texas at the moment. And then as part of the cost management services we provide, as you can see there on the screen, we have change order analysis, and that's a dedicated team. All they do is change order analysis and management, negotiating with subcontractors and contractors. That feeds into our cost estimating service. We do construction management, of course, and facility condition assessment. And very important to note that on the cost management side, about 80% of our services or our revenue comes from the federal government, be it Department of Defense, Department of State, GSA, or any other agencies. We do a lot of work with the Navy, the Air Force, and we are a GSA schedule holder. The professional services schedule, specifically 8717, and that's a little bit about us.
There you go. Well, we appreciate it, and your expertise. You'll get a dose of the true expertise in just a minute as we take a look at the regulations that are coming down. So if you're in contracting, you're familiar with some of these clauses, but one of the reasons why this is so important is an independent government estimate of construction costs that means it must be done, must be prepared and furnished to the contracting officer, and the estimate shall be prepared in much detail as though the government were competing for awards. So those are the two things that kind of craft what get us to the next part, which is GSA P120. And you know a little bit more about this than the average bear, right?
Yeah, we do. We actually, our principals here actually co-authored the GSA P120. We helped GSA years ago to write it and then update it the next time around. And so your last point there on the previous slide about the detail, we understand the federal government is all about detail, and the more information you can get, the better you can substantiate the cost and explain to your peers and your supervisors. And a lot of what the GSA P120 is about is the detail. It's like, how do you do an estimate? What information do you have to present in this estimate? You need to supply labor, material, and equipment breakdowns, or just unit rates, what formats you have to follow. And because we wrote it, we feel, listen, a lot of people can do estimating, but we just feel we have a bit of a leg up on our competition when it comes to understanding the P120 and what the government really requires through the estimating process, as we go from as early as program estimating, program level, where you just have areas, all the way through 100% construction documents.
And this will be provided as well, the GSA P120, and a follow-up will make sure you get all the information on that for everybody. But that's great, and we appreciate you being here. And the insight from somebody that was involved in the process of writing the document is immeasurable. So what is your biggest issue with construction costs? And a lot of folks obviously have issues with what's happening in the market conditions, and the costs always seem to increase. You can pick as many as you want, by the way. And then you have the AE, the CM, the GC, and consultants aren't on the same page. That never happens, does it, Mark?
No, never.
Accuracy of early estimates. Imagine what we're doing right now. And that kind of weaves into the current budget versus budgets that are happening, the current market versus budgets that are happening right now. Because, hey, if you did cost estimating back in 2014, 2015, 2016, and you have projects that are just rolling out because of being caught up or those, things have changed just a little bit in the past couple of years, haven't they, Martin?
Yeah, and that's a big part of why we are where we are with budgets versus current estimates. Is there's just been, even in the last 6 months, been a huge amount of change in the market, and understanding that is obviously very important. And
so we appreciate you guys. Here we go. Here's what we got for that. So the costs always seem to increase. We've never seen anything that made it go backwards. At least I've never seen it. So And the accuracy of early estimates is the #1 reason there, and that is probably one of the biggest challenges for folks nowadays, don't you think, Martin?
Yeah, and that's, part of what we feel we can provide to owners like people on this call is, where do you get your information from and your data from, and how do you approach the estimate? The earlier poll that you took where we talked about, people want to understand the process. A lot of that speaks to what process do you follow and how do you do it so that you don't get surprised, down the road.
Yep. And when you're setting up a good budget, I mean, everybody wants a good budget so that they can meet that budget and kind of get things rolling. So give us some things here. This is a perfect way to get into what it kind of looks like from the beginning. So let's talk.
Yeah. So, a good budget, everybody wants a good budget. And we really feel there's a big difference between reactive cost estimating, where you get drawings, you're kind of divorced from the design team and from the owner, and you just take the documents and you do an estimate, you measure some stuff on a drawing, and you put some pricing to it. And there's a big difference between that and how we feel we do our cost estimating or cost modeling, where you have multiple interviews with the architect and the engineer, so you can have a good understanding of the scope. We all know that early on at program and concept, schematic, even sometimes in DD level, there just isn't a lot of development of the drawings and the documentation. There's some narrative and basis of design documents, but having these interviews, I still have to meet an engineer or an architect who won't explain to you what their intent is when you call them and ask them. It's not on the drawing, it's not in the narrative, but they can tell you. So we've very much engaged the consultant team very, very early on in understanding the scope, because it ultimately drives the money, and which is what we want to control. And to that same point, the quality, the performance of the systems in the project, talking to the owner about what do they really want from the building, what's the value that the project brings to them. It may be more than just, there may be reasons why there are specific finishes or specific systems, more so than it looks pretty. There may be some lead requirements or some energy analysis and savings, all kinds of things like that. And and then you can read through those points, but the last one there under the good budget should contain adequate reserves, and that's all about the contingencies and allowances. And we actually do a risk analysis. We don't like to just add a percentage to a budget because it's called the design contingency or whatever it may be. We actually analyze the documents and do a risk analysis to see, well, what are the unknowns and what costs are associated with those unknowns. So I always use the example of replace or remove, or remove or replace, or abandon in place or remove, existing utility. There's a note on the drawing. Well, there's a huge difference in cost between abandoning in place and removing the utility line. So we actually will talk to the consultants and make sure that we understand which one of those two will be needed to be done. And if nobody knows, then we know the range of cost is $10,000 to $100,000 potentially.
Wow.
And that difference in cost, it becomes part of the design contingency. So we include $10,000 for abandoning in place, but we know if they have to remove it, it may be $50,000, and that difference is how we build up our reserves and contingencies. So it's really based on the risk of the project, which differs from project to project. And then avoidance, we should avoid to just build budgets based on what people are saying and what we think people want or like. It happens a lot. I think there's a lot of input at budget stage. Everybody has something to say. Everybody's an expert, and we have to really be careful to do that. And then to play it safe, we talk about being under budget a lot. The bids come in high and the estimate's low, but there's certainly a lot of time, especially in today's market where everybody's kind of scared a little bit. There's a real risk of being high because we are now so conservative, and then we stop a project dead in its tracks when it's not really required. So, considering all those points is very important when you set that initial budget, and then that budget gets used down the road as you go through design, obviously.
Exactly. And the socially acceptable budgets, we've seen groupthink, and everybody gets in the room and they're like, well, this is what it should be. And it just isn't based on any reality. And and we've all seen that happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I love the way that you have this laid out here, where if you look at the budgeting estimating process, you have the scope, the expectations, and the budget, but it doesn't just, it's not static, correct?
Correct, and we call it the, for lack of a better term, the lumpy mattress effect. If you push down on a mattress, on one end, then the other end kind of goes up. You push down the other end, and this side goes up. So that relationship between scope and expectations and budget is very important. If the budget is set and the owner only has $2 million or $100 million to build a project, and the scope increases, well, then something's got to give, right? You can't increase everything and think the budget's going to remain. So expectations and quality and program has to then decrease. So we have to have that conversation with the owner and with the design team to say, listen, you've added scope, or you've added something to the project. We know the budget is not going to move, so we have to reduce program, or we have to reduce the quality of your finishes or something to keep that budget intact. And then, so the way we do this is really, as I said earlier, we start with the cost model at concept stage or programming stage as early as we can get engaged. Mm-hmm. And that cost model is based on, because there's no real design at that point, it's based on a lot of historic data. Mm-hmm. And we make it clear what that data is and what it's based on. For example, if we do a new laboratory and we have an allowance for the mechanical systems of $100 a square foot, and we say it's based on X, Y, and Z. And the same for all the other trades and elements, and that's what forms our cost model. So we then tell the designers and the engineers and the architects that's what it's based on. This is the cost model. We all agree the bottom line is $100 million, and they then use that as a design tool. So they know this is what the budget includes and allows, and this is what I have to design to. Now, when the first design comes out at concept or DD level, or the next submission, and when we update the cost model, and we see, oh, the mechanical cost is now $120 a square foot, then we start saying, well, why is that? Because at the cost model, the early cost model stage, we allowed $100, and it was based on X, Y, and Z, which everybody agreed on, and so it's gone up by $20 a square foot, and there may be a perfectly good reason for it. But then we talk to the team, and we realize that if the mechanical system goes up by $20 a square foot, then the exterior closure or the interior construction or the finishes or the conveyance or something's got to give. It's got to go down by $20 a square foot to maintain your budget. And that's an ongoing process throughout the whole design, which is really invaluable, and it really takes care of any surprises that comes down the road.
So this is awesome. I love your first bullet point, is users always want more than the owner can afford. That's way too familiar to me.
Right, and that
I resemble that remark.
Yeah, it's part of being involved in all the meetings, is making sure that expectations are met and set, and the user, yes, everybody who's going to use the facility wants this, the sky and the moon, but they can't always get it. And being realistic that early on and setting those expectations is key. And if you don't do it, it's a great challenge, and it leads to mistakes being made and budget issues happening down the road. We feel as a third-party cost management firm that we are a professional outfit. We know what we're doing. There are horses for courses. Not everybody understands cost, and a lot of times we see owners asking construction managers, either as agent or at risk, to do budgets. And I think we think it's a little dangerous, because it sets you up for inaccurate budgeting and cost. Not to knock them at all. They all are very good at what they do, but there are certain things that we do better than they do, and they do better than we do. And we just want to make sure that owners understand the expertise that they get when they ask for these early budgets. Yep. We have a ton of historic cost data. Using that data correctly is important. You cannot use data from 2016 to predict costs for 2020 at the moment. You also cannot use data from 2008. It was a buyer's market. Even if you escalate it by 3% a year from then, it's not going to be sufficient for today's marketplace. So knowing your historic data and how you use it is critical.
Exactly. And that kind of,
Yep.
in fact, that leads us right into this next one, which is right now market influences. And this is more recent. I mean, back in 2008, it was artificially suppressed because the real estate market, everything in the commercial market evaporated, right? So then you had this crush in on the federal world, and everybody wanted to do the work, and so they just wanted to stay busy, and next thing you know, it drove those prices down to an artificial level. And since then, obviously, it's not even close to 2008. It's not even close to what happened 2 years ago, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not, and we see a lot of frustration in the marketplace, and that, I think this is probably the key slide for everybody on this, or the next couple of slides on this presentation, is why are projects just keep continuing coming on in over budget, and we do believe that a lot, when we get involved early on, even when we do our fee proposals, we see the budgets a lot of times, and you just have to sometimes shake your head when you see the size of the building and you see the budget, and there is no way that this can be built for that amount, and it's you kind of feel like everybody's being set up for failure because somewhere a budget was set years ago and people don't understand revising that budget based on current market conditions is absolutely critical, and the first step, and you're looking at the moment 10 to 20% bids coming in over budgets, and mostly because budgets were set a little earlier and not using the correct data. As we all know, the tariffs has become a big deal. It's almost the flavor of the month, and we talk to, so we negotiate change orders all the time, and we talk to subcontractors all the time about pricing, and we research our pricing when we do our estimates. And the latest feedback just last week is that we cannot hold, we being the subcontractor, mechanical or electrical, for example, cannot hold a bid to the same amount for more than a week or two, which is
a week or two?
A week or two, and that's because they do not know when the tariffs are going to hit, what tariffs are going to hit, how much they're going to be, and they are running scared. So it has a dual effect. People are now inflating costs unreasonably because everybody's scared. So they add 20% to a budget for mechanical equipment, for example, and it may only be 6 or 7%. We did some research on steel pricing, and even though everybody's saying, oh, we have to add 10% or 15% to steel pricing, we've done research over the last year since they started talking about steel tariffs. And when you look at prices then and prices now, they don't differ that much. They've gone up, yes, but they haven't gone up by that much. So you have to be really careful on how you apply these tariffs and these percentages, and certainly market conditions. You can do an estimate and you can escalate it by the current escalation rates, but you have to consider what's happening in the market and how competitive it is or not. And at the moment, it's not a buyer's market, and subs, can charge almost what they want, and you have to consider that.
And that's the case on two sides. So politically, we stay away from the politics of everything, but you have this on either side. But if you look at the economy is cranking right now, especially in the construction market. You don't have to go very far. If you're in DC, all you got to do is drive in and you see cranes all over the place. And there's a lot of work happening throughout the country, and it creates that pressure on just supply and demand. And then you have the wild card of tariffs and other market influences potentially, as you have disasters in different places, right? Those all can funnel into problems for construction projects, and whether it's just simple delays in those things. So these are great. The market influencers and an intelligent approach to budgeting and pricing, obviously, is the direction that you want to go. And you guys are great. Here's this. I love this too. So the first thing is set a good budget. Everybody wants a good budget. They don't want one that gets blown out or one that is overly inflated by being too risk averse, right?
Right. One of the earlier points. So all this is really about how good is your data, right? I mean, anybody can do a quantity takeoff and measure things and drawings, but how good is the data that you use to develop your estimate? And understanding project size matters. It was on the previous slide, but I just want to get back to that. It's like 2 slides up, another one back. it's just, project size matters. And we've done now probably 10 or 15 $300,000-$400,000 renovation estimates for clients. That's just a small interior renovation, but it's small and it's complicated. It's phased a lot of times, and the bids that we see sometimes are coming in double. And you think there is no way that I'm going to pay $600 a square foot for a small renovation. So my point being, with all that kind of feedback and all that data that we gather over time, that's the kind of stuff that you have to really keep in mind when you're building budgets. And if you want to not be surprised down the road, it's much more to it than just a quantity takeoff. And anyway, you can go back to the solution slide. It kind of gets me going because it's really important to understand, which is why my first point was get away from being a reactive estimator and really consider the market and the conditions and the data and the project, when it's going to be done and how it's going to be done. And I think third-party estimating is where you get that. It's not, we do estimating. Construction managers and GCs, they build very well. They get you great projects, but we're the ones with the owner and the A&E who's concerned about the money. So I think, involving a third-party estimator as the FAR regulates is very, very important.
And do it early, right? You don't have to wait.
Right, because you have to get the budget right. If you do the budget or the concept estimate and you're 10 or 15 or 20% low, it's too hard to go back for more money, as everybody on this call understands. You can't go back and ask for money from Capitol Hill or from, anywhere. So
good luck with that.
Being accurate, and the effective formats comes into that because we use uni format as the P120 states you should, and all that means is you can manage costs by building elements, which means instead of getting bids by trade, example concrete, formwork, reinforcement, glass, you break your estimate down by element, which is foundations, exterior closure, interior construction, and those things don't really change, from on the same project. For the most part, in an office building, the exterior closure is X% of the overall cost. The total cost may vary, but the percentage of total cost doesn't really vary, unless they're coming up with an all-glass building instead of some kind of combination. But then you know that as well. So the format is key to controlling cost and knowing where the money is going, because if you separate cost by trade, there's concrete in almost every element. So you see a total bid in concrete of $1 million, but you have no idea what that $1 million is made up of. Is it in foundations? Is it in superstructure? Is it in site work? So, using the correct format as the P120 mandates is critical for cost control. And then the last point there, we talked about it briefly already, the risk and contingencies and escalation. I would behoove anybody, you don't have to use us, but getting a consultant on board who understands cost risk at the moment is very, very important if you do not want to overshoot budgets. And if you want, even if the budget is lower than the actual bid, if you want to be able to explain what's going on to your peers or to management, it's critical to understand that last line item.
Yep, and that's what makes it so. That's actually why it's required, right? So to this. All right, so we'll get to this final poll of what you need help with. Updating a current project budget. There's a lot of folks that are probably going to choose. You can choose as many as you want again, but updating your current budget, getting accurate cost estimates on a new project. Lots of things have changed over the past couple of years, and all the metrics, at least for like you mentioned, Martin, steel pricing. There's increases there. There's also potential for mechanical increases and things like that from the tariffs. Making sure you're compliant with the FAR and GSA regulations or something else, please contact me, because that's where we want to make sure we get you what you want. So
we currently, sorry Dave, just to jump in, we currently are contracted to Department of Defense to do a bunch of market surveys, and which is great because I think the government actually gets it. You have to understand when you build what's going on in your market, which is just as important as everything we've talked about, is how busy are the subcontractors in the place where I want to build my project? Yep. That's key. And so doing those market surveys provides us and the government with really good data, again, of how competitive will the bids be and what are we expecting on bid day.
Yeah, exactly. And just so you know, it's 25% have a current project that they need help with, and 75% need help on a new project. So thanks for that. And we are going to get to questions. So open up that panel. I have a couple already that of folks that have asked that. You can do multiple things. You can just open that. You can raise your hand if you have the dialogue. Let's make sure we do that. So why do we have to have a third party when GC provides the estimate? Well, the first answer is because it's in the FAR. Besides that, why would it be important to do that?
Right. So, like I said earlier, the GC is really good at building things, and they do a great job at that. Budgeting is not really. Obviously, they can do a budget, and they are in tune with market costs. But when they go out to bids early on, when there's no real project, it's in design, it's concept stage. The subcontractors are so busy. They're not looking at the drawings. They see the overall project, and they just throw a number at, it's going to be approximately X per square foot, so it's up, my bid is $2 million. Mm-hmm. And that's just why you never get a breakdown early on from when they do estimates. But we analyze the drawings. We give you, I don't know, 50, 20, 60-page estimate, and it's based on all of the discussions we've had with the design team. So we see exactly what our budget is based on. And until there's a real project on the street that the subs know that they have a good chance of getting or can get, their estimating is just not considering all the scope of the project, and it's inaccurate.
Yeah, I think.
That's just how it is,
That is how it is. And that's why the FAR puts it out there, and GSA has the documentation, P120, to get you involved in the process so that they can help. It's really helping the agency do it and covering the agency as well, because it helps protect from gouging as well, right? It's a great.
And one of the challenges that we run into very often is once we put out an estimate and we say it's X dollars, and the GC or the CM says it's X plus 10 or X minus 10, we really need the owner to drive, because we work, we're a third-party consultant. The owner makes the ultimate decision, and we need the owner to not accept everything they see from the CM and GCs if budget is an issue, because we have the detail in our estimates. It's based on fact, it's based on data. And why should the GC, just because he said, well, I got it from 3 subs, why is that the number? And if you do that multiple times, the budget just goes up, and it's based on mostly a bunch of allowances, where we would be more than happy to engage them and go through line item by line item and have people analyze the estimate and say, okay, well, why is our number high or low? Here's all the details. And in the end, you'll see that there's no reason. And so we really need support on making sure that that early estimate that we do is used for the budget and not just accept what everybody else throws on the table and, like I said earlier, what's socially acceptable.
All right. So next question from Sally. Where do you get your your pricing information from, if I could read?
Yeah. So Sally, thanks. We, like I said, we negotiate. So we provide cost management, we provide construction management as owner's rep services, and then we have change order analysis. So we get, on our CM side, as agent, we see all the bids, we take all of the bids we get, and we feed them into our database. On the change order side, where we actually negotiate nuts and bolts, we use that information that we get directly from the subcontractors and feed that into our cost database. And then obviously we have historic data over the last 30 years of just being in the industry. Yeah. And kind of combine all of that.
I think that whenever you talk about data, you can also, a lot of trends pop up and things that you wouldn't see as just simply kind of slicing it by percentages of the total.
Right.
Right.
I mean, we do market, like I said, we do market surveys, we talk to GCs, we ascertain how busy the subs are, and we feel we have a really good, now listen, it's still a crystal ball, right? We don't know exactly what's going to be in the market, 2 weeks or a month or 3 months from now, but at least our data is based on and substantiated on real numbers. And then we third party, which means we are not married to anybody. We're just making sure that the owner gets a fair shake on the budget side.
and the owner in this case being the federal government and us as taxpayers, just saying.
You know, I'd rather go spend my money at Best Buy than pay it in taxes, but you know.
Hey, you and me both. Speaking of Best Buy, I'm not even going to talk about my refrigerator incident.
Right.
That's one of the. So here's a budgeting issue, right? When you don't want something to cost as much as it really does in reality, you might not want it to cost that much, but it just happens to. And that was my issue with Best Buy. And thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that, Martin.
Yeah. You know, we also, as part of our cost management group, we provide value engineering services, which I also know is mandated by the federal government on projects of a certain size, that you have a value engineering workshop. And with the emphasis on value, not cost cutting. So it's not, hey, let's change all the nice porcelain tile or stone that we have and make it vinyl. It's actually to give the project its best value, or the owner the best value to the project. Over time, that may be to maintenance and operations, that may be. But that's also a service that's key. If we end up over budget, then doing a formal value engineering study or workshop to really see, well, what can we do to get back in budget in a smart and value way, not just cost cutting, is very important.
Absolutely. So John has a question here. We have a project that it was initiated in 2016. What can I do to update the budget? Great question, by the way, because that's where a lot of folks are. So this happened in 2016. That's a few years ago. So a couple of little changes probably.
Right. So the challenge with that is you should be careful. I would warn you against just applying a straight up factor or escalation percentage to your 2016 budget, because of the changes in the market and because of various increases in various trades, some tariff related, some not. We would go in to try and get the detail of your budget and then apply factors to various trades or elements. You know, mechanical may have gone up less than electrical. You know, there's been quite an increase in copper, there's been an increase in steel, which affects a lot of trade. But instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to increase my overall budget by 10%, let's be smart about it. Look at the trades, apply percentages to each trade based on what's going on in the market, and then look at your overall escalation, which, you know, it historically has been about 3%, 2.7% over the, 10, 15 years. But the last year, 2017, 2018, it probably was around 3.5%, 4%. The last 12 months, and I haven't seen this in a long time actually, the last 12 months report that came out from, ENR and Turner combined, I believe, had a 5.5% increase, and that's just escalation over the last 12 months. That's not market conditions and the lack of competition. So yeah, applying those factors to each trade, and then look at the market conditions and say, all right, nobody's available to do this job. On the mechanical side, your job is heavy and mechanical, so we have to, increase it even more. That's what I would recommend.
Absolutely.
And it's not a long exercise. That's something that takes a day and a half, and you can at least, defend your budget and say what it's based on.
Sweet. Very good. We got a couple of other questions. One of the questions is the presentation going to be made available? Yes, it will be, and I'll tell you in just a minute how that is. But this is my favorite, staying out of hot water, keeping yourself and your agency off of CNN. Always a good idea. But be real. First thing, be realistic. Make sure that your budget is based in reality and not fantasy. Engage those. We mentioned this earlier, Martin, is that you want to engage the third-party professionals early. Don't wait until you're, 80% through or whatever, just to try to get that checkbox for saying, hey, we engage these folks. Right. And there are folks with GSA P120 cost management approach experience. You happen to have one right here. Once you get a copy of the P120 that we send out as a recap, you will see who helped author that, and Hanscomb is prominently placed in there. So that's awesome. And
that early conceptual budget is, it's not very expensive, which is another good thing to do it early. It's because there's not a lot of information, right? So you can't spend weeks and weeks in preparing that budget. It's really just based on your data, your experience, and then being smart about it. So you get pretty good bang for your buck if you do it as early as concept or programming stage.
Yep. and then verifying the contractor credentials. And I don't know if you know this, but for everybody there, every once in a while, your contractors may not be entirely truthful. Let's just say, just make sure you verify they have the certifications that they're supposed to have, and expand your base. There's a lot of companies that are out there injecting some new blood, helping to stir that up, getting some of the, you mentioned the formats, making sure that you get an understanding of the new formatting and how that affects the estimating process, and also using BPAs. You've had those in the past, Martin, so you know exactly how they work. It's faster access to the vendors and gets things done much faster, and it minimizes the paperwork for everybody who's here from contracting. That's the way those things work. And speaking of contracting and procurement, if you want some more information on Hanscomb, there's small business, as we mentioned earlier. There's a DUNS number, the cage. They have a GSA schedule. And if you need any other socioeconomic set-asides, you guys have partners that they can get to you through, right?
Right, we do. And it's important, I wanted to mention as well, you know, this is kind of geared towards the GSA schedule, but we have over the years have done a lot of work for GSA and the federal government. It's mostly been through architects and engineers, and then at previous firms like the P120, and you know, I wrote the construction cost guide for federal courthouses for GSA central office. So we certainly have GSA experience in a lot of it, and federal, like I've said earlier through the presentation. This is really just geared towards using the schedule to get those services.
Exactly. We will answer the other questions that are coming in. One with resilience, we'll talk about that in just a second. So what you will get is you get the presentation. If there's anything that's associated with the Q&A that for everybody to share, supporting documents, capabilities, procurement options, as well as additional documentation if you ask for anything else. But you will get a supply of the P120, copy of the FAR, so that you know where everything is and lines up of why this is coming down on everybody's heads. And with that, I do have one question: is how does resilience, the requirements for resilience, and we've done some briefings on that with resilience in the past, and resiliency, how does that apply to the pricing now? Do you have a play on resiliency? And
can you explain resiliency a little bit?
So resiliency is it usually revolves around making sure that the operation of a facility is able to continue either through other energy sources, and we can take this offline, but that's the kind of play. So we'll answer that question, and I'll get you some more information. We'll connect the dots.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, we have full-time, and a lot of it applies to mechanical and electrical, and we have, full-time MVP professionals here who, a lot of what they do is deal with operations and maintenance and energy usage and life cycle cost analysis. So it's certainly, I wouldn't say that I know everything, but, I know a little bit enough. I know enough to be dangerous about some trades, but we have guys, we have horses for courses, and we have experts in all kinds of fields, and we can certainly help with that.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate the information. If you have any additional information that you need, there's Martin's information as well. You can give him a shout. And anybody that responded with action items, we will follow up with you. GovBrief support will follow up with you. And with that, we would just want to thank you for joining us, because, hey, you guys have plenty of things to do in a given day. And we hope that this was beneficial, and to at least get to the surface area. And if we need to dive down, you got Martin at your disposal as well. So we appreciate you guys being here. Thanks again, Martin. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. Thanks everybody for attending.
You betcha. We'll see you guys.